The waiter looked at James Brown and said, "We don't serve your kind here." It was 1962, and Brown was at the peak of his fame, but in this Georgia restaurant, he was just another black man being refused service. Brown didn't yell, he didn't leave. Instead, he did something that 10 minutes later had the entire restaurant in tears and changed that waiter's life forever. It was a hot August afternoon in 1962, somewhere between Macon and Augusta, Georgia. James Brown and his band had just finished a show the night before and were driving to their next performance. They'd been on the road for 16 hours straight, and everyone was exhausted and hungry. When they saw a small diner off Highway 1 with a sign that said Miller's Family Restaurant, Brown made the decision to stop. His road manager, Ben, immediately had concerns. "James, I don't think that's a good idea. This is rural Georgia. That place doesn't look like—" "I know exactly what it looks like," Brown interrupted. "But I'm hungry, my band is hungry, and we have money to pay. We're stopping." The diner was a typical small-town establishment. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a long counter with spinning stools, and the smell of fried food hanging in the air. Through the window, they could see it was about half full, maybe 20 people scattered around, all of them white. Brown's band members exchanged nervous glances. This was 1962 Georgia. The Civil Rights Act wouldn't be passed for another 2 years. Segregation was still legal, still enforced, and still dangerous to challenge. Black musicians who got too bold about where they ate or stayed sometimes ended up beaten, arrested, or worse. "Maybe we should just find somewhere else," one of the horn players said quietly. Brown looked at his band, 6 talented musicians who'd worked their way to the top of the rhythm and blues world, but still couldn't sit down and eat a meal in their own country without fear. Something in him snapped, not violently, not angrily, but definitively. "No," Brown said. "We're eating here. Stay calm, stay dignified, and follow my lead." They walked into Miller's Family Restaurant at exactly 2:47 p.m. The moment they entered, every conversation stopped. Forks paused mid-air. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. 20 pairs of white eyes turned to stare at the 7 black men who just walked through the door. The waiter, a thin man in his mid-30s named Ray Miller, whose father owned the restaurant, approached them quickly. His expression was a mixture of panic and anger. "I'm sorry," Ray said, though his tone suggested he wasn't sorry at all. "But we can't serve you here." Brown looked at him calmly. "Why not?" "We have a policy. We serve whites only." "I see. And if we're willing to pay the same as everyone else?" Ray's jaw tightened. "Policy is policy. We don't serve your kind here." The phrase hung in the air like poison. Your kind, as if Brown and his band weren't human beings, weren't American citizens, weren't men who'd done nothing wrong except be born with darker skin. Brown felt his band members tensing behind him. He held up a hand slightly, signaling them to stay calm. Then he did something unexpected. He smiled. "I understand," Brown said. "You have a policy. That's fine. But I have a question before we leave. How much would it cost to buy a meal for everyone in this restaurant?" Ray blinked, confused. "What?" "Everyone here. All these customers. How much would it cost me to pay for everyone's meal?" Ray looked around the restaurant, trying to figure out what was happening. I don't know. Maybe $60, $70? "Okay," Brown said. He pulled out his wallet, a thick leather wallet that was clearly full of cash, and started counting out bills. "Here's $100. That should cover everyone's meal plus a generous tip for the staff. I'd like to pay for everyone's lunch." The restaurant was dead silent. Every person was watching this unfold. Ray stared at the money in Brown's hand. "Sir, I don't understand. You can't eat here, but you want to pay for everyone else?" "That's right. See, I'm James Brown. Maybe you've heard of me, maybe you haven't. I sing for a living. Last night I performed in front of 3,000 people who paid to see me. Tonight I'll do it again. I make good money doing what I love. But right now, I can't get served in this restaurant because of the color of my skin. Brown gestured to the other customers, who were listening to every word. But these folks can eat here. They have that right. And you know what? I don't want to take that away from them. So I'm going to make sure they have a good meal today. On me. Because even though your policy says I'm not welcome here, I can still show kindness to people who've never shown kindness to me. Ray stood there, holding the $100, looking completely lost. One of the other diners, an elderly woman in a floral dress, spoke up. "Ray, what are you doing? Let them sit down and eat." "Ma'am, I can't. It's the policy. My daddy would—" "Your daddy isn't here," she said firmly. "I am, and I'm telling you this is wrong." A middle-aged man in a mechanic's uniform stood up from his booth. "I know who you are," he said to Brown. "My daughter plays your records all the time. Please, 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 right? She loves that song." "That's me," Brown said. The mechanic looked at Ray. "Ray, my daughter would be ashamed of me if I sat here and let you turn away someone she admires just because he's colored. Hell, I'm ashamed of me right now." Other diners started murmuring. A young couple stood up and walked toward the door, clearly uncomfortable. But most people stayed, and some were starting to look at Ray with expressions that ranged from uncomfortable to openly critical. Ray's face was red now. He was caught between his father's rules, the changing sentiment in the room, and the $100 in his hand that this famous musician was trying to give him for refusing him service. "I don't want your money," Ray finally said, trying to hand it back. "Keep it," Brown said. "Give everyone here a good meal. That's all I ask." "But you're not even eating." Brown smiled, but it was a sad smile. "I know. Isn't that something? I can pay for y'all to eat, but I can't eat with you. That's the policy, right?" The elderly woman stood up from her booth. "That's enough, Ray. I've been coming to this restaurant for 20 years, and I've never been ashamed to eat here until right now." She looked at Brown. "Mr. Brown, I apologize for this treatment. This isn't right." Then she did something remarkable. She walked over to her booth, picked up her plate of half-eaten meatloaf and mashed potatoes, and carried it to where Brown was standing. "If you can't sit down and eat here, then I won't either. You can have my meal. I'm leaving." The mechanic stood up. "Me too. Ray, I'm not eating here today, not like this." One by one, several other diners stood up and started walking out. Not all of them. Some stayed, clearly uncomfortable but not willing to give up their lunch, but enough that the restaurant suddenly felt half empty. Ray stood there, watching his customers leave, holding $100 he didn't earn, and realizing that something had shifted in a way he didn't fully understand. Brown watched the people leaving and felt something complicated, gratitude for their gesture, but also sadness that it had come to this. He turned to Ray one more time. "I don't hate you," Brown said quietly. "I don't even hate your policy. I just want you to understand something. Every black person who tries to eat here and gets turned away, we're not trying to cause trouble. We're just tired. We're tired of being told we're not good enough to sit in the same room as white folks. We're tired of working hard, making money, being successful, and still being treated like we're less than human." Ray's eyes were starting to water. "I'm just following my daddy's rules. I know. But maybe it's time to ask yourself if those rules are right. Your daddy isn't here. You are. You get to decide what kind of man you want to be. Do you want to be the man who turned away James Brown and watched his customers leave in disgust? Or do you want to be the man who had the courage to do what's right even if it went against what he was taught?" Ray stood there in silence for a long moment. Then he said something so quietly that Brown almost didn't hear it. "I'm sorry." "What?" "I'm sorry." Ray's voice was louder now, and there were tears running down his face. "You're right. This is wrong. My daddy's rules are wrong, and I'm sorry." Brown nodded. "Thank you for saying that." "Please," Ray said. "Please sit down. You and your band. I'll serve you. I don't care what my daddy says. This is wrong, and I won't be part of it anymore." Brown looked at his band members, who were all staring at this crying white waiter with expressions of shock. Then Brown looked around the restaurant at the remaining diners, some of whom were nodding encouragingly, others who looked uncomfortable but weren't leaving. "Okay," Brown said. "We'll eat here. Thank you." Ray led them to the largest booth in the restaurant and personally took their orders. His hands were shaking as he wrote everything down. When he brought them water, he spilled a little because he was so nervous. "It's okay," Brown said gently. "Take your time." The meal itself was surreal. Brown and his band sat in that booth, eating burgers and fries, while the remaining white customers tried to pretend everything was normal. Some kept glancing over, curious but trying not to stare. The elderly woman who'd offered Brown her meal had come back in and was sitting at the counter, having refused to leave until she saw them properly served. When they finished eating, Ray brought the check. Brown looked at it, then looked at Ray. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. It's on the house." "That's not necessary." "Yes, it is. It's the least I can do after what I said to you." Brown pulled out money anyway and left it on the table, enough to cover the meal and a 50% tip. "You stood up to what you were taught. That takes courage. Take the money. You earned it by being willing to change." Ray picked up the money with shaking hands. "Mr. Brown, can I ask you something?" "Sure." "Why did you want to pay for everyone else's meal, even after I refused to serve you?" Brown thought about it for a moment. "Because hate doesn't solve hate. Anger doesn't solve anger. If I'd come in here and caused a scene, yelled at you, maybe gotten in a fight, what would that accomplish? You'd still think black people were troublemakers and nothing would change. But by showing you kindness even when you showed me hate, maybe I gave you a reason to question what you'd been taught. And it looks like it worked." Ray nodded, wiping his eyes. "My daddy's going to be furious when he finds out I served you." "Are you going to tell him?" "I have to. And I'm going to tell him that from now on, we serve everyone. All colors. If he wants to fire me, that's his choice. But I won't turn away good people just because of their skin color. Not anymore." Brown stood up and extended his hand. Ray hesitated for just a moment, then shook it firmly. "You're going to catch hell for this," Brown said. "I know. But I'd rather catch hell for doing right than live easy doing wrong." As Brown and his band walked out of Miller's family restaurant, the elderly woman at the counter called out to them. "Mr. Brown, thank you for showing us what dignity looks like. My granddaughter was right about you." "Your granddaughter?" "She plays your music all the time, says you're going to change the world. After what I saw today, I believe her." 3 months later, Brown was back on the road near that same stretch of highway. On impulse, he decided to stop at Miller's again. When he walked in, he saw something that made him smile. The restaurant was integrated, black families, white families, all eating together. And there was a new sign in the window. "All welcome here." Ray saw Brown come in and rushed over. "Mr. Brown, I was hoping you'd come back." "What happened?" Brown asked, gesturing to the diverse crowd. "My daddy was furious at first, just like I thought he'd be. We had a huge fight. But then something interesting happened. More customers started coming. Turns out a lot of people in this town were waiting for someone to be first. Once we opened our doors to everyone, business actually got better, not worse. My daddy couldn't argue with the numbers." Ray led Brown to a booth, the same booth where they'd eaten that August day 3 months ago. "This is your booth now. Whenever you're passing through, you eat free." "I can pay," Brown said. "I know you can, but this isn't about money. It's about saying thank you for teaching me something my daddy should have taught me but didn't. That we're all just people trying to get through this life, and the color of our skin doesn't change that." Years later, when people would ask James Brown about his role in the civil rights movement, he'd tell this story. He'd talk about the day he refused to leave a segregated restaurant, not with anger or violence, but with an act of kindness that forced people to see the absurdity of their own hatred. "I didn't integrate that restaurant with my fists or with the law," Brown would say. "I integrated it by showing them that dignity and kindness aren't about color. When you treat hate with more hate, you just create more hate. But when you respond to hate with grace, sometimes, not always, but sometimes, you change hearts." Ray Miller continued to run Miller's family restaurant for decades. He became an advocate for integration in his community, often telling the story of the day James Brown walked into his restaurant and changed his life with a $100 bill and a lesson in humanity. When Ray died in 1998, His obituary mentioned that encounter, noting that it had been the day he stopped following his father's rules and started following his conscience. The lesson from that hot August day in 1962 wasn't just about segregation or civil rights. It was about the power of responding to injustice, not with the same energy it brings to you, but with something higher. Brown could have been angry. He had every right to be. He could have been violent. The system had been violent to him his entire life. Instead, he chose a different path. He chose to demonstrate grace under pressure, to show kindness to people who showed him hate, and to prove that dignity isn't given by others. It's something you carry with you regardless of how you're treated. That's what real strength looks like. Not the strength to fight back, but the strength to refuse to let someone else's hatred make you hateful. Not the strength to destroy, but the strength to transform. Not the strength to win an argument, but the strength to change a heart. If this story of dignity, grace, and the power of responding to hate with kindness moved you, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember that how we respond to injustice matters as much as the injustice itself. Hit that notification bell for more true stories about legends who changed the world, not with anger, but with unshakable dignity.